Welcome to the final video on the Unpack the Standards module. Here are somewhat ambitious goals for this video. First, use these observable features from the evidence statements to identify possibilities for student performance. Next, apply evidence statements to content, practice, and cross-cutting concepts. Find connections between the evidence statements, the performance expectations, and the grade-level learning progression matrices to help us write assessment claims and/or targets. The evidence statements were designed to articulate how students can use the practices to demonstrate their understanding of the DCIs through the lens of the cross-cutting concepts, and thus demonstrate proficiency on each performance expectation. The evidence statements do this by clarifying how the three dimensions could be assessed together rather than independent units, also by clarifying the underlying knowledge required for each DCI, by providing detailed approaches to the science and engineering practices, and by clarifying how the cross-cutting concepts might be used to deepen content and practice-driven learning. Given the shift to the three-dimensional learning, it is important to note that the minimum proficiency on the NGSS will be higher than for most previous standards, because content and practice were previously separated and not interconnected. For example, our 2006 science standards are a great example of this. And also previous standards, there was no bridge defined to help us build on understanding using our prior knowledge. It is also important to note that proficiency with these more rigorous and demanding standards will also not look the same. Before jumping into the evidence statements, I think it's important to recap the major shifts found in the NGSS. These shifts are published in Appendix A of the NGSS. The intent of the list of shifts is not to capture the shifts in instruction as much as it is to articulate the ways in which the NGSS are different from previous standards by design. For example, Shift 1. K-12 science education should reflect the interconnected nature of science as it is practiced and experienced in the real world. Many great science teachers are already doing this. However, they are doing this because they choose to engage in this practice. A quick glance at our 2006 science standards will show us that this is not something that is supported in our previous standards. It is important to spend time looking at these shifts before diving into the NGSS themselves, because there are many times when you encounter a standard that may make you uncomfortable in one way or another. When this happens, it's important to determine what it is about the standard that is causing the issue, and then to decide if it is an intentional shift or not. Often, the standards that make us challenge our thinking or our practice can be clearly tied to one or more of these shifts. When that is the case, we can take the time to reflect on whether we disagree with the shift. Can we think of a better way to implement it, or do we just need time to adjust to it? Shift 2. In many cases, the specificity of the NGSS makes it feel prescriptive. Please remember, when reading them, that they are intended to be performance expectations, things that students should be able to do at the end of the day, not a recipe for how to teach. This also gets at the point of the specific intersection and how, if we look at the foundation boxes, we may see other examples of coming to different practices, different content, and different cross-cutting concepts with these item examples. Shift 3. In the NGSS, sometimes we find content that we aren't used to seeing at these earlier grades, such as some basic genetics at grade 3. That has been included in an attempt to have a coherent progression across grade levels. Shift 4. The deeper applied understandings can provide some stress for teachers. For example, in the coverage of waves, there is some significant detail about how we use waves for communication. This is not covered in our previous 2006 standards, but it does tie directly to some college and career-relevant concepts that will benefit students. Shift 5. The integration of engineering provides the opportunity for us as teachers to be more explicit with our students about what engineering is and what it is like to engage in it. Problem-based labs and opportunities to design solutions are included already in many classrooms. The standards simply make it explicit, some areas especially, where this is a great way to access the content. Shift 6. Teachers sometimes have questions about topics that have been included, emphasized, decreased, shifted, or removed completely. There were extensive reviews by college professors and companies to determine whether the standards included the content and skills students truly need to be successful. These intentional design considerations stem back to the framework's guiding principles to be more focused for deeper exploration and for instilling lifelong learners. Shift 7. Each performance expectation is already cross-referenced to the Common Core standards. This both supports your efforts to integrate your instruction with the Common Core for math and ELA, and it helps you to know how to reference the integration work you are already doing. So what are the evidence statements? First, how does NAEP meet this 3D science learning? This is a strong item that exemplifies how you can assess a DCI and a practice in combination that does not exactly match the NGSS, but still fits with the spirit of the standards. In our 2014 alignment work, this was aligned to SEP3, Component DCI LS3A and LS3B, and Cross-Cutting Concepts 7, Stability and Change. For our development work, we are asking you to align to the NGSS, so let's look at Grade 3 LS3-1 and Grade 3 LS3-2. Grade 3 LS3-1 states, students should analyze and interpret data to provide evidence that plants and animals have traits inherited from parents and that variation of these traits exists in a group of similar organisms. This is further broken down into the 3 dimensions, specifically SEP4, analyzing and interpreting data, component core idea LS3A and LS3B, and the cross-cutting concept patterns. Also, let's look at Grade 3 LS3-2. This states students should use evidence to support the explanation that traits can be influenced by the environment. This is further broken down into Practice 6, which is constructing explanations, the same component DCIs, and the cross-cutting concept cause and effect. First, the reason we went into these 2 performance expectations is that the NGSS performance expectations call for a specific intersection of the 3 dimensions to identify what students should know and be able to do upon completion of that learning in that grade. In Grade 3, from looking at the learning progressions, we know this content is appropriate for this grade band. But if we look at the 3rd grade life science content for heredity and inheritance and variation of traits, there are only 2 possibilities to align to, which we have identified here. The difference between these 2 are that there is a focus on SEP4 versus SEP6. Although it is clear we could be doing both with this multi-step item example, this item also illustrates the ways in which multi-part alignments are possible. This alignment also shows a difference in the cross-cutting concepts between patterns and cause and effect. Let's see if we can tease out which standard, or maybe standards, are appropriate for our alignment using the evidence statements.